You are live.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll begin our C4 agenda for tonight. First thing to do is welcome everyone. And do we need to do introductions, Trent, do you feel?
It's always good to do introductions. I
Okay,
think
why don't you go ahead and call people as you see them, please.
All right, so I see on the screen Mayor Drinkwine from Estacada, Mr. Gornick, who is our sanitary member, Mr. Gronke, who's our impact community representative, Councillor Heisey from Milwaukee, Councillor Sherman from Happy Valley, Mayor Fitzgerald from City of Wilsonville, Dan Blue, who is one of our presenters from Metro, Councillor Christine Lewis from Metro, Commissioner Paul Savas from the county, Mayor Jules Walter from West Lynn, Mr. Dwight Brashear from Smart Transit, Mayor Tammy Stemple from Gladstone, Mayor Lyle Smith from Oregon City, Martin Myers, who's our CPO rep, Teresa Christopherson, who is our rural transit representative, Councillor Pratt from Tualatin, Mayor Scott Kaiser from Malala, Mayor Stan Pulliam from Sandy, Gloria Pinzone, sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. She's with Metro. Please correct me when you do come on though, Gloria. Mr. John Keith, who are my Hamlet's rep, Matthew Silva, who's our fire district rep, and then Mayor Joe Buck from Lake Oswego. And then just so that we have it on the record, our attendees are Chris Niematsu from City of Wilsonville. He's the thing on the transportation team. Dana Webb from Oregon City Transportation Team. Our Hamlet alternate is here. That's Kenny Cernak. Jamie from Happy Valley, Jamie Huff from Happy Valley. And then Marge, who's one of our CPO members and former CPO primary member. Mary Whitney, who is a new name for me, Mike Besner, our county transportation team, Roy Brower. I know this name. I'm sorry if I'm forgetting your organization. And then Tom Whitegraff, who is our TriMet member and transit alternate for the urban areas. So that's our full group, I would say. And this is a request from some of our attendees in the past. If you came on and you don't see your organization name next to your name there, like mine is, does not have it, could you please just rename yourself so that it has your organization for those who are watching who might not know your district or your agency, so that they can see it either here or in a recording when it goes live. And that's everybody here, and I have the flag up when you're ready for that.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone. Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. You all join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thank you. First up on the agenda is the minutes. Is there any amendments, changes, or is there a motion to approve, or both?
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay. So moved by Mayor Drinkwine and seconded by Mayor Fitzgerald. See no further comments, questions. How do you want to take the roll, Trent? What's the most efficient way? All those opposed to approving the minutes, raise your hand. Okay. Minutes are approved unanimously, almost unanimously. Mayor Drinkwine does not approve it because he raised his hand.
I meant the other way. Sorry.
The other way. Okay, so
I'm
it's unanimous.
premature
All right. Thank you. Minutes are approved. I guess first up is the Metro South Station presentation. We have Estee Siegel and Gloria Pinzon. If I pronounced your names correctly, great. If I didn't, I apologize. So if you want to take it away, the floor is yours.
And I'll just hop in with a couple words of introduction before Esty and Dan and Gloria take over. And Roy Brower from the introductions and the attendee list is also from Metro. He doesn't need to be on this side. But we've got the Metro crew here today because we are still in our due diligence phase, looking at a property located off Jennifer Street for a potential future transfer station. We have obviously a suite of services that are in high demand at our Oregon City Metro South. It is beloved by folks who do their home repairs, need to get rid of some stuff, some downsizing that we've all been doing during COVID. And we are backing up traffic out onto the street. And we also have just some inefficiencies on the site as we have grown, both for commercial the haulers who come and pick up curbside, but also for what's called self-haul, which is everybody from me with 100 pounds in the back of my Subaru to folks who are professional contractors who are still coming in with trucks that don't tip. So we have a lot of services we provide. We do as much of the reclaim as we can. We do household hazardous waste, and we try and be a good partner and community, but we've just outgrown the site. So we have been long searching sites in the southern part of the region, all the way north to the North Clackamas industrial area in Milwaukee, and then including all of the area almost into Beaver Creek. So the zonings helped determine where we did our search. And one site that scored fairly high on kind of parcel attributes is actually being considered for sale. So with that, I will turn it over to SC, Gloria, Dan for an update. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Gloria, could you pull up the slide deck for me?
Absolutely. Let me pull it up.
Okay. I'll just introduce myself again. Good evening, everybody. My name is Dan Blue. I'm the Systems Planning Manager in Metro's Waste Prevention and Environmental Services Department. We're the garbage and recycling folks. And I support teams within Metro that are working on these new facility siting projects. And notably, we're working on a potential new facility for Western Washington County, out where I live. And also the Future South project, which we're here to discuss with you tonight. Again, with me tonight is SD Siegel, project manager for the Future South project, and Gloria Pinzon, our engagement coordinator for both of the siting projects. And let me see if I can see this. Okay, it looks like, can everybody see the slides at this point? Okay, great, thank you. I just didn't have it up myself. So, okay, next slide, please. Sorry, I'm just checking here. All right, great. So our agenda this evening, before I jump into it, I just want to remind you that we were back in front of this, in front of the C4 subcommittee in April of 2020, and then also again in June of 2020. And that was, I believe, the full C4 to get input from rural communities who will be potentially future customers. So tonight we're going to cover an overview of our existing transfer station, which Councillor Lewis provided a little bit of information on. We'll show some of what modern transfer stations look like and what types of services they provide. The work that we're doing on planning for the future of transfer services in the region. And then also we hope to leave a little bit of time for questions. So I'm going to move fairly quickly through these slides. If you do have questions that come up during the slide deck, go ahead and throw them in the chat. That way we can get through the content, and then we'll hopefully save that time for questions at the end. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a map of the Metro region, and it shows the major transfer stations, public and private, in the region. The two Metro-owned facilities are Metro Central at the top, and then Metro South in the southern portion there in red. Only the publicly owned stations offer a full suite of services serving commercial and residential customers with recycling, household hazardous waste, and other amenities. Next slide. So what is a transfer station? I think that there are some misconceptions about what a transfer station is. It is an enclosed facility where discarded recyclable and non-recyclable materials are collected temporarily before being prepared for transfer to final destinations. Things like garbage, wood, cardboard, yard debris, appliances, household hazardous waste like paint or batteries, cleaners, and that kind of thing. They're brought in by residents and small businesses and large commercial garbage trucks. The majority of that material comes into a transfer station, gets compacted tightly into containers and trucks, and usually only there for less than 24 hours, and then is transferred in those trucks to a landfill in Arlington, Oregon, in the Columbia Gorge. So some materials are sorted on and stored on site for transfer to recycling facilities, for example. Finally, I want to point out a transfer station is not an open landfill where discarded materials would sit out in the open for long periods of time. Next slide. So a little bit about our station today. The current Metro South station provides a variety of services, which we've described, and it is at critical capacity. As Councillor Lewis said, a lot of people love that facility, probably because it's super convenient off of 205. It serves between 800 and 1,200 customers a day and over 250,000 customers overall per year. And we've actually seen a recent increase during the pandemic in self-haul services or self-haul customers. So in its current state, the facility is unable to efficiently keep up with the demand in this growing part of the metro region. And maintaining safety, we are finding, is a challenge with our site. Next slide. So a little bit more about South. So the station's nearly 40 years old, and we actually have a backlog of expensive capital projects necessary to maintain the viability of the buildings and infrastructure on site. Councillor Lewis mentioned it, customer wait times can be very long. We don't have enough space at the facility to recover materials that are bound for the landfill or to accept things like commercial food waste. So in other words, materials that could be reused or recovered are being disposed of because of those operational and space challenges. I do want to also point out, and this is really critical, the Metro South station is in the floodplain. And in the 96 flood, we had to evacuate our household hazardous waste facility. So we have been investigating options for a new home for some or all of the services currently provided at Metro South for over a decade, and including hoping that we could utilize the old Rossman landfill site across the street from our facility. But that space has been rezoned and is no longer an option for us. Next slide, please. Okay, so we really kind of picked up speed after the adoption of our 2030 regional waste plan, which was created in collaboration with community members and local governments and organizations such as yours. The plan includes things that we're already doing in the region, but also adds new areas of work, particularly around waste reduction, environmental health, racial equity, and providing equitable services to communities in the region. We'll share a link to the regional waste plan in the chat so that you all can have that link, just to save time tonight. So next slide, please. So about 2 years ago, I mentioned we are looking more seriously and intentionally for potential sites to move some or all of the services that are at Metro South. And we have been inspired by modern transfer stations in Seattle and King County, many of which have been built in the last 8 to 10 years. So the top photo on the slide is a viewing room and education center at the Seattle North Station. That viewing room looks down onto the transfer floor and is very popular with the residents in the neighborhood. Next slide, please. So some of the expected elements and benefits of the project. We see a new facility as a critical part of the community infrastructure, similar to fire stations or schools, in that it will provide affordable garbage and recycling services to thousands of customers. We anticipate greater operational efficiency, living wage jobs, greater resilience and flexibility for the future growth in the region. We want to make sure we find opportunities to maximize benefits to the host community, including integrating community-facing elements such as waste-related education, meeting spaces, and public art. Also, as you may be aware, Metro's Community Enhancement Program is set to collect $1 per ton on all waste brought to our facilities. And these funds are meant to benefit the host communities where a transfer station is located. In Metro South transfer station's case, the program currently provides over $300,000 a year to Oregon City to distribute to community members annually. Next slide, please. So I'll move quickly through these. Here's some pictures of those modern transfer stations. This is North Transfer Station. It is located right in the middle of a neighborhood with shops and coffee shops and retail and offices across the street. This facility accepts residential and commercial garbage, self-haul, and commercial trucks. Next slide. Here's another vantage point of that same facility. So the facility was designed with landscaping and recreational areas that serve to beautify and activate the block, including walking paths, a basketball court, and a parkour course. So it was designed with heating and cooling systems inside the building rather than up on top of the roof. And that's to improve sight lines which was something that was really important to those neighboring residents and businesses. Next slide. Here's another facility we like. This is Factoria, and it's located in Bellevue, Washington, east of Seattle. It's located in the mixed-use commercial manufacturing area, but not far from a natural area and residential homes. The location of the building, a sound wall, and many tall trees buffer the facility from neighboring homes and businesses. Next slide. Okay, so I think this is my last slide. All of the examples of modern stations that we've seen incorporate public art. At Seattle North Station, there's an orange eye-catching piece in front entitled Reclaimed that represents the actual topography of the historic site when the first transfer station was built at that location. I like that wall of old reclaimed street signs. That's the entry to the South Transfer Station in Seattle. And there's some other art pictures there. So these are just a few examples of what modern stations can look like and some of the amenities that can come with them. And this is my last slide. I think we'll turn it over to Esty at this point. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Hi, Esty Siegel. I'm the project manager of this team of people working on this site location. And just the next slide shows that shows the phases of our planned project. So the current phase is site acquisition, and then we would move into design and programming, followed by permitting and construction. This is really a 5-year project. We're in the first phase, looking for a site for a new facility. We do expect to engage community throughout all phases of the project and expect to develop a good neighbor agreement to guide operations and management for the facility over the long run. Next slide. We should note that finding land in northern Clackamas County that meets our basic criteria has been the #1 challenge for this project, as there is extremely limited appropriately zoned land of large size and for sale, right? So as part of phase 1, finding a location, we developed a set of base and functional criteria to search for and assess possible sites. And our base criteria directed us to sites of around size of a minimum of 7 acres, but we ranked larger sites higher, as it's preferred to have a larger site of at least 12 to 15 acres, and the larger is better. Local city and county zoning codes have guided our search as well. A transfer facility isn't allowed outright use in most general industrial zoned areas. So we've prioritized looking for sites with this zoning, as it's in line with jurisdictional and city visions for development. So this technical information, paired with input from a local community advisory group, has guided staff and continues to guide us as we consider possible sites and locations. Next slide. The site search area that we establish is shown on this slide, and it follows major transportation corridors and shows the zoning that allows for development of a transfer station. So the blue and the purple blue is the general industrial, other shades of blue are other industrial zones, as well as salmon for commercial and yellow for mixed use. And transfer facilities could be allowed in those zones as well, but they're a conditional use. So we've focused again on the industrial zoning as it's preferable. Next slide. So this site, the Jennifer Street site in unincorporated Clackamas County, was one of the highest ranked sites using our project criteria, and where the owner expressed an interest in possibly selling his property for this project use. Out of 160 sites that we identified that met our base criteria, and none of them were currently on the market or for sale, I need to note. This site ranked #6 out of 160. So high, it ranked high due to its size, the zoning, easy access from major highways, distance from residential areas, to name a few of its strengths. Next slide. Here's a photo of the site looking to the northeast from above, and highlights the businesses and landmarks in close proximity. You can see they're mostly industrial, warehouse, and manufacturing uses surrounding the site on 3 sides, and the Clackamas River to the south. Harley Creek sits between the site and the river and is managed by Water Environment Services, who we've been in close contact with about future potential partnerships if Metro were to move forward with this site. And also we're aware of the Veterans Village transitional housing community just to the east of the site. And we've been in touch with the Housing Authority and the on-site manager with this project around our proposal and the project. Next slide. This is a high-level look at what we see as the possible opportunities and risks of the site. We are attracted by the large site size and that it's industrial zone land in an accessible area. The fact that it's been mined as a rock quarry for over 50 years and has been filled with soil from across the region could make it challenging to build on. We're looking at risks such as the condition of the fill, potential flooding, and traffic impacts as part of our due diligence investigations currently. Next slide. Just a couple pictures of some of our due diligence work. Our environmental contractor, Stantec, did extensive soil investigations on the site earlier this year, included drilling 10 areas into the fill to test for contaminants and debris. Thus far, that study reported no serious contamination that needs immediate mitigation, at least in the 10 borings that were sampled. Stantec did recommend some further testing of soil and groundwater and silts, which we are doing now. Next slide. We also recently completed a geotechnical investigation with Central Geotech engineers to understand the soil structure of the fill and where native rock is on the site. This study confirmed the heterogeneous makeup of the fill on this site and laid out possible areas for building on the site in the future, given its history as a quarry and the fact that it's still in process of being refilled. A cost estimator is now looking at order of magnitude costs to prepare the site for development. Next slide. So traffic is one of the major concerns surfacing from nearby businesses and property owners and elected officials. We hired a traffic consultant to do some initial research on existing traffic on Jennifer Street and on land use approval requirements for such a facility. The street appears to have capacity to support the proposed facility use, but we would need to address access to Jennifer Street from nearby connector roads like 106th, 120th, and 122nd. And also address property frontage improvements to ensure our customers have safe, easy access to the site. We would most likely need to dedicate right-of-way for a turn-in lane into the project and construct bike and pedestrian facilities along Jennifer Street in front of the site. One thing to point out is that peak usage of our facility, our current facility, is on Saturdays, mostly the self-haul customers, followed by Mondays and then Fridays. And peak hours of use are usually between 11 and 3 p.m. Whereas we've heard that most of the industrial businesses in the quarter have peak hours early and late in the day and generate most truck traffic during the week versus the weekend days, though we continue to gather more information on that. Next slide. So the proximity of the site to the Clackamas River is another common concern we're hearing related to this site. The concern is that there could be contaminated materials brought in that make their way into the stormwater system and the river. We're acutely aware that the Clackamas River provides drinking water for about 300,000 regional residents and that there are 4 drinking water intakes close to the site. Metro is committed to responsible environmental stewardship at all our facilities. And like our 2 existing transfer stations, including Metro South, which Dan already mentioned, is entirely within the 100-year floodplain currently, and which flooded in 1996, a new facility would be fully permitted and meet or exceed current requirements to keep pollution out of waterways and the soil. The facility would be designed with features to protect the environment from pollution and hazards, and staff at our facilities are fully trained in emergency response. Also, we think this site might be well suited for providing education opportunities to school groups and students on the environment and the solid waste system. And as Dan pointed out, many recently built transfer stations around the world incorporate this. And we think this site is unique in that there is this riparian area and the proximity to Carly Creek makes it attractive to provide that type of education. Next slide. So the purchase and sale agreement that we've entered into with the seller of the current owner of the site runs through the middle of August. But we're working on a possible extension to be able to finish our investigations and summarize what we're hearing from the public for our Metro councilors. What you see on this timeline may change if we're able to extend the timeline. Metro will not make a decision on specific services that move or stay until a property is acquired, but we expect to present options to Metro Council in the fall, based on what we learned from our investigations and hearing from partners, stakeholders, and the community. And then we'll turn it over to Gloria next for a few more, bit more information on our community outreach work.
Thanks, Esty. So I'll try to go through sharing some of the things that we've done and that we've heard from some community members, though we are still right now going through all the information to summarize it into a report. We wanted to give you all some highlights. So in this early phase of the project, we're focusing on creating awareness and then hopefully beginning long-term relationships with neighboring businesses, residents, urban indigenous people, First Nations, and water conservation groups like the river water providers, for example. If the property agreement does get extended, then we'll be reaching out directly to people who live near the site as well in the future this summer. We hosted a community advisory group for the past year or so, and focus groups and partnerships in partnership with Unite Oregon, which concluded in May. The advisory group's input was summarized into what we're calling a community lens. It includes criteria that will be used to evaluate Jennifer Street or any other property that gets is considered seriously for purchase for the purpose of building a new transfer station. And it will be used alongside staff's technical information and also a financial evaluation to make the decision about whether to move forward on that property or not. Past meeting recordings are available on our website. I'm happy to link that to you if you're interested. We also put out a community survey recently, which closed in June, and this allowed for more people to become a little bit more aware about this project and share their ideas. Over 1,200 people answered our survey in multiple languages. The majority of respondents were from, and we are still processing through the comments and results. So I only have some of the high level information to share with you today. But so this slide shows you that when people were asked if they would use, if they are likely to use such a facility if it were built, the majority of people said that they were either somewhat likely or very likely to. When asked about what their preferred expanded services might be, the top 4 choices that came up in the survey were disposal of things that are typically hard to dispose of, like large bulky items, styrofoam, things like that, as well as repair or reuse options, education, and compost cells. The potential benefits to the community that people are excited about are more affordable fees for the services that Metro would provide, expanded jobs and training opportunities, education for the community members around waste prevention and how to protect the environment, and also other community-centered amenities like viewing rooms and partnerships with community groups or schools, for example, were of interest to people as well. When asked about the level of support people had for the potential location, respondents were about almost 60% either support or somewhat support the proposed location, 13% were neither, and about 20% opposed the proposed location. So we do have some questions for you. I know I think we're out of time. I don't know how much time we can have for questions, Trent, or if you'd like folks to send them to us after this meeting.
Yeah, we started a few minutes late waiting for people to log on. So I think we have a light enough agenda. We can make some time for questions today.
Okay, thank you. So we did prepare some questions. One thing is like, was anything surprising to you that you heard today? And are there other things that you think we should consider? And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see each other. In just a second.
So Gloria, there's a question in the chat. it says, what sort of mitigation or protection measures could Metro take to ensure the safety of the drinking water intakes from the Clackamas? And I think, Esty, you might be in a good position to answer that question.
Sure. Yeah, so we're looking into that right now. And we really, a stormwater management system needs to provide several levels of controls for treating rainwater runoff, such as intercepting it and reusing water on site, treating stormwater on site through bioswales and other means, and detention ponds. And really the system would maintain separation between stormwater and groundwater through the use of liners and under drains throughout the site. And then if there's household hazardous waste services at the site, like we do at our current site, we would separate HHW from stormwater management systems to isolate contaminants that might be released in an emergency. And this is like a fully contained, with any outflows going into a sump, separated from stormwater and sanitary. So that's, you know, it's really going to depend, the specifics are going to depend on the site that we build on, but that's some of the ways we would plan to do it and what we're hearing from our consultants as best practice.
Okay, I have a question, but I see Ed Gronke has his hand up. So Ed?
Very quickly, it appears that you've made up your mind on the Jennifer site, certainly considering the amount of effort you'd already put into it. I was just wondering, the Rossman's landfill, some information came to my attention last week. Are you familiar with the developer who's trying to develop Rossman's landfill, where he said he will need a $40 million public subsidy to make the project pencil?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We absolutely have not made up our minds about the Jennifer Street. We're still in that due diligence period, and as Esty pointed out, there are a lot of challenges with the site and a lot of site development costs. And council is going to need to hear kind of the full picture of the results of our due diligence process before they can make a decision on whether to acquire that property or not. But you are right, we are spending a lot of time and energy on that and resources. We are aware of the potential development on the old Rossman site. That property was rezoned, making it ineligible for a transfer station. We have been in touch with the development company and are tracking it and monitoring it. And so, yeah, thank you for that.
Okay, so the last time you presented to us, my recollection was you were unsure as to whether or not you would actually use the existing South Metro site for maybe the commercial traffic and or the retail, and then the Jennifer, the second site, it'd be either or. And it sounds like the response to the transportation and question earlier, or the statement about traffic, seemed to indicate about the weekend hours that it was more that you're leaning towards self-haul at this site. So is that a determination, first of all, that this will be the self-haul site, or will this be a site where it's all in one place? Because the traffic is, as a person who uses South Metro, the traffic is pretty intense in the weekdays as well.
Thank you. We have not come to any conclusions about whether some or all services would move to the Jennifer Street site were we to acquire it. Again, we're still doing due diligence on that site and trying to, understand fully what could or shouldn't move to that location should we buy it. This is going to be a decision that council will help us get to. Yeah, I think, shoot, I lost my train of thought. There was one other thought about that. Traffic is an issue at our current location. And, I do reflect on guidance that our Metro Council gave us in the fall of 2019 to look for a large enough property to move all services. But again, that decision has not been made.
Okay. You mentioned the streets that connect to Jennifer, but you didn't speak to not 106, but you didn't speak to Evelyn Street, the railroad tracks, and also pedestrian facilities, bike facilities that would need to be on all those facilities. This is not a very pedestrian, frankly, it's not a very commuter friendly area, especially with all the traffic and the big trucks. I mean, you got to be awfully careful with turning radiuses and everything else. And also the other issue that was brought to my attention as far as being problematic is the amount of traffic right now that in the small space at the I-205 exit on-ramp, and in that between that and 82nd Avenue, the intersection. So there's not a lot of depth for queue lanes there. So that's something that was been mentioned. But I want to go back to probably the most important question at all as a result of the county commission being presented with a situation where we were basically didn't have any choice other than to approve the increase passed through on by Metro, a 17% increase for the tipping fees, which actually was quite a lot of dollars to the commercial the commercial haulers and the business haulers that bring in heavy loads. And obviously a 70% increase, obviously, to every individual who provides your service in front of their home. So we were told that part of this increase was due to the property acquisition. So if it's 17% for this, are there projections for what the cost increase would be for these projects, knowing this is being also tied in regionally to the cost for the west facility as well? So what are the projections, just thumbnail sketch of what the cost increases will be to support these facilities?
Thank you for that. Yeah, we're really early in the process. So much depends on the site that we land on. And in terms of, we still don't know which services would move. If, and we may end up moving all of them. We aren't certain yet in terms of how much site work. It could be 10 or it could be 20% of the overall cost of the project. So at this point in time, unfortunately, we don't have cost estimates to share in terms of future rate impacts, both either to the tip fee or to the regional system fee. I will share that Metro is starting a systems facilities planning effort to look at the entire Metro region and both public and private infrastructure for solid waste, recycling, yard debris, and look at gaps in services. And Metro Council will be getting information about what those gaps are. And Metro Council will help direct us in terms of what different scenarios they would prefer and associated costs with those kinds of infrastructure investments in the region. At this stage, we're really at the property acquisition phase, and money has already been set aside in our capital budget to make these purchases. So we're just not quite there yet in the process.
Okay, my last question then on this very note is that, so will the cost estimates be made known to the council prior to them acquiring this property?
The cost for acquisition, they're already aware of what we've negotiated as an.
I meant the rough estimate for the entire project, because if it's cost prohibitive, not acquire the property, I would imagine.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. We do have a construction cost estimator who was actually out on site Friday of last week and is looking at all of the geotechnical data, the environmental data, the site conditions, where the floodplain ends. And is preparing initial construction cost estimates to inform, this acquisition decision. So certainly cost and tip fee potential impact and rate impact would be considered by Metro when we complete the due diligence period. So, and all of that will be made publicly available.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I don't see any hands up. So does anyone have any questions? I think staff are taking care of the chat questions.
And I would ask if Councillor Lewis has anything to add in my response to your questions.
I don't, other than I guess just kind of a couple of reinstatements for overview. Yes, we're doing a lot of due diligence here. It's because this is a rare site within the area that we need to be making an acquisition that's actually got a willing seller, but our mind is not made up. So Mr. Gronke, we are spending a lot of time here, but only because it's the only site. If you have other sites, I am still extremely interested in finding other potential locations. And then the other thing I just want to underscore is that the most recent rates did not have a specific driver of site acquisition driving those rates. The system fee does include capital, does include all of the different public amenities that the system needs in order to make sure that everybody has access to things like household hazardous waste, which are not well supported out in the private industry. But the most recent rates were not driven by this site or this search. So those are the kind of two things I wanted to underscore, but otherwise, thank you so much for the thoughts. And I share everybody's concern about the traffic, not necessarily on Jennifer Street, but on adjacent streets.
Okay. Well, thank you, Metro. Thanks everyone for your presentation. We're running a little bit behind on the agenda, but we'll catch up. The next agenda item up is the post-fire and upcoming fire season update. So I guess we have our Daniel Neibauer, our interim director of disaster management, to present. Daniel.
Hi, thanks, Commissioner Savas. Thank you for having me and for your interest in wildfire preparation, response, and recovery. As you know, this wildfire season is already on top of us, way earlier than normal. We had a dry spring and now multiple days of a record-setting heat, and it's really dry out there. So I was going to get right into talking about last year's wildfire season and what we're kind of working and trying to learn from that. The formal after-action process is still ongoing. We're a little delayed by varying FEMA support that we had some trouble kind of getting through, and eventually just went out and contracted our own consultant. And as you're likely familiar with, we've been prioritizing fire recovery and had multiple disasters, including continued COVID response, supporting the vaccine clinics, ice storms, and chlorine shortages. So there's plenty of stuff that's we've been busy with. We're proud of our many accomplishments during the fire response. There's no loss of life, comparatively low structural loss, realizing that a single structural loss has a significant impact on an individual at the same time. Our RV shelter site, it was something we didn't expect. Everyone plans for shelters in a mass congregate type setting, and we were able to shift gears and recognize that people were bringing a lot of their own shelter with them and kind of get that done. However, we realized that there's areas we would like to improve. The process is still ongoing, but here are some of the areas we've identified, and most that we're already working on in some fashion, even if the report isn't complete yet. We'll start off with communications. For anybody that's remotely familiar with any kind of disaster response and emergency management, communications always comes up and likely always will. Some of the things we want to be able to look at are improved communications between Clackamas County communications, Lake Oswego communications, and disaster management. We saw some gaps there that we weren't comfortable with in terms of getting information to the call takers and dispatchers about a variety of different things, whether it's evacuation zones, traffic, all kinds of stuff like that. So we're working on getting some improvements there. Improvement evacuation notifications and an understanding to the community as to what they mean. Where are the evacuation zones located currently? And the understanding that the systems we use, like wireless alerts, have what we call splash, which means that it's any cell phone that hits that tower, and it may be slightly outside of the evacuation zone. So make sure that people have a resource to go to check where the current evacuation zones are. Getting one point of contact on evacuation information within the county. So as we were putting out alerts, both law enforcement was out there and fire was out there, both noting things that were going on, and we were getting different reports coming in different ways. So we want to have one centralized point that is recommending different evacuation zones. And then work on our public inquiry center, or our PIC staffing, make sure that we have enough staffing and that the hours are long enough. Those are some of the things in the communications we're adding to our list of things to work on. And the things that we are working to strengthen because we thought they were fairly good already. Relocation of Ccom. So for those that aren't aware, our 911 dispatch communication center was close enough to the evacuation zone. It wasn't a level 3, but it was close enough that they wanted to make sure they moved to safety, and they were able to relocate with minor hiccups and continue taking 911 calls and dispatching. Fire co-located with Ccom, and that was a big benefit in getting some information there. So I'll talk a little bit about how we've created that into a little bit of a best practice. And we were lucky with our partners and the strength of our partners. Multnomah County already had a 24/7 call center for COVID, and was able to kind of swing in and take over night shifts for us for our call center to make sure that our public inquiry center line was answered 24/7. Into our next area, kind of labeled around community-based organizations and some of our interaction with cities and counties. One of the things we would like to improve on is our link with our community-based organizations into the EOC. We used community-based organizations throughout the response, and we fortunately did have a good relationship with them through COVID, and we had built that, and I think that was very beneficial. But I think getting information back out to them and making sure they know how to reach the EOC and request resources is something that we want to be able to get on there. Getting a better understanding of evacuation levels and when to set them, and talking with fire and law enforcement about that. Shifting the whole county to level 1 initially we thought was a good idea, because we were sending out so many alerts, and to bring people's awareness up so they understand what's going on and they're paying attention. Totally meant for people to be aware and pay attention. Instead, we created traffic jams because everybody that was not familiar with level 1, 2, 3 thought they had to evacuate. So we took a lesson learned there about how better ways to make sure that we're setting those evacuation zones. Shelters were difficult to open for a variety of reasons. One, congregate shelters were not a good practice at the time because of COVID. And at the same time, Red Cross was overwhelmed. That Red Cross across the country is the go-to to open a large mass care shelter in a disaster. And they were fully deployed along the West Coast for wildfires. And so we had difficulty when we called them and asked, can you open a shelter? And they said, we have no one available to do that. And also the abundance of RVs. We were very surprised when we just had a lot of RVs starting to come up, and it makes sense to why that existed and why that happened. And so we're looking to make sure that in the future we have a variety of options for people to shelter on that. So strength in this area, as much as I talked about the CBO link to the EOC, our community-based organizations were phenomenal, and they really stepped up and strengthened our response to make sure that individuals had their needs met or were finding ways to get resources. City of Portland, again, a partnership pulling out, and the strength of our partnership. City of Portland was able to send their neighborhood emergency team to the Clackamas Town Center and relieved a great burden for us for helping to make sure that people there had communication with us, as well as we had a lot of donations come there, and they helped us manage those donations and make sure that what was donated there and left at the site was able to be used at the site, and turn away things that we didn't want, like giant bags of used clothes that were dirty. And then Multnomah County helping us on the shelter piece, and they had the convention center already open for a houseless shelter, and we're able to make part of that available to us for some of the fire evacuees. Was very beneficial, and kind of shows the strength of our relationship and wanting us to keep that relationship, and hopefully able to return the favor. Well, hopefully we don't have any disasters, but if they ever need us, hopefully we can return the favor. Under our emergency operations center, some things we want to improve on: unified command, a little slower to establish than we wanted to, and hindered communications, particularly around fire. So unified command is when we have law enforcement, fire, and our emergency management personnel all in the same area, and being able to talk and communicate a little bit more. Looking at better staffing our financial and logistical sections, particularly with county staff that are familiar with our procedures and the FEMA processes. Also onboarding into the EOC, we had county staff volunteering to come in, and I was operations section chief at the time, and I will definitely say that I was at fault for when somebody came in. I said, I need help with this, go do it, without necessarily telling them who was in charge or the layout of the room or different processes like that. They all did a great job and got the task done, but make sure that we have an onboarding process so where they have that. We also, for a short period of time, had 2 EOCs, emergency operations centers, running at the same time, one in response to COVID and one in response to fire. And that was not a best practice. That made some difficulties for us on the logistics side and communication side. So we definitely won't be doing that again. And we had some technology solutions that we'd use in exercises and smaller activations that were unable to handle a larger activation. And so we're looking at getting those replaced and finding something else. GIS was phenomenal for us. The creation of the fire map and that turning into the insurance map afterwards was great. But we only really, at the end of it, had 2 staff that knew all the systems well enough. And so they were on call for 11 days straight. So we want to make sure that we've got the capacity there. And release of public information, make sure that we understand who has the authority and that all public information is going through kind of one source. We had law enforcement releasing stuff and the EOC releasing information, and we just want to make sure that information has been reviewed and compared by single source, so it's not there. A little bit after the response side, talking about the debris, the state did take the lead on the debris. We do have a strong team at Clackamas County on debris that continues to work with the state, and we're continuing our debris planning, but I think we've really helped fine tune some things in Clackamas County to make sure that our community is being looked after for those homeowners that were had damage, as well as on the right of way. There's some things that we're still working on with them to make sure that the state's doing the right job and doing the ways that we want to. That is a very fast rundown of the things we've learned so far. We do have our consultants team is still going on. We just finished our last group interview for getting information on there. So that's what most of my notes have. I do want to make one clarification. Multnomah County helped manage the shelter, but we also owe a debt of gratitude to Metro for allowing us to use the convention center. That was a great relief. And I was texting your emergency manager, who I was very thankful for when she answered in the affirmative that we could use that facility. So our next step for this report is to get the draft report from the consultant and then review that with our major response partners to make sure that we've stated everything accurately. We've tried to get as much different points of view as possible, but we always may miss one. We may miss something from somebody's perspective, so we don't want to miss anything on there. And then we'll be developing an improvement plan and integrating that in with the county's the countywide improvement plan onto how we are, taking actions to make sure that we're working on these things. I have a bit to talk about on the planning for the wildfire season and a couple other planning efforts we are. But Trent, I don't know if it's good to take questions now on this, or if you want me to go the rest of the way through.
I leave that to the group. Commissioner Savas, how would you like to proceed?
I think we have one hand up, so we could take that one comment. I did want to just let everyone know that the Board of County Commissioners today, who only has authority in the unincorporated areas, we discussed this on Tuesday and took action today to declare an emergency and a ban basically on the use of fireworks. I will say that in my 10 years of being on the commission, I have never seen such a swarm of emails and a rate of emails and concerns, phone calls have come in about asking us to ban at a rate of 1 to 2 a minute, or 1 every 2 minutes during the day. Yesterday, especially in today, unbelievable how we got hundreds of emails. So with that, the first person on the list here, or the only person, is Martin Myers.
Hi, thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation. The rural areas very much appreciate the county's engagement on this issue. There's a lot of worry and concern about this out here in the rural areas. 2 things that came up in discussions at the community leaders meeting that I've not yet heard you address. The first one is evacuation routes. There are sections of Riverside still smoldering up above Memaloose right now. This is about 20 miles from my own house, with winds of 20 miles an hour only several days ago. If there was a fire tomorrow, if there was a reason to evacuate, last year, my area took 3 to 5 hours to evacuate. I'm very much concerned about that, as are the people out here. So I wonder if you could address evacuation routes, and if you have anything ready to go if this problem comes up, when it comes up. Second is animal evacuation. This is near and dear to the rural areas, mostly because people come back up to check on their animals and take care of them. So the evacuation is not fully effective if we don't have animal evacuation. I don't think the rural areas are looking for the county to evacuate animals. That's not it. It's to help us figure out how to do it. If you could address those two things, I would appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Certainly, and thank you for bringing those up from particularly from the meeting there. We are working with our consultants on talking about those items. On the traffic side, a couple of different things that we want to do. We want to make sure that we're getting our evacuation notices out in such a way that people that aren't at risk don't feel the need to evacuate. So hopefully, one, that helps relieve some of the capacity, some of the traffic on the road. We're also working with DTD and talking about different ways and looking at some of the areas that are probable for fires and seeing how we can change some of the traffic's patterns. That, as you know, unfortunately, part of the problem is sometimes there's only one way in and out. So trying to work and find solutions for that is definitely top of mind. On the animals is another one, and so we definitely want to work a lot of preparedness in that methodology, because there are so many animals. We know that having enough facilities to kind of house every animal out there is not what we want to try to do, but we want to make sure that we're getting the tools done and out there for that. So that definitely, both of those are top of mind, and I don't have a good solution on animals yet, but we're working toward it.
Yeah, I do recall we had some capacity left over at the fairgrounds, but I do know there were some other sites as well that took livestock. So
yeah,
appreciate everyone who offered up their sites for that. Next up is Mayor Lyle Smith.
Thank you, Commissioner Savas. So I guess I would encourage the county to work on the evacuation level progression and how that went. I don't think it went well. Oregon City was a primary evacuation site, set up camp. We had, all kinds of stuff. And then all of a sudden we were turned to a level 2 and our entire city panicked. Plus we had an overload already of people. So I just don't think how that was rolled out was the best way. And so I hope that there's lots of thought, considering that, we had set up shelters, we had Red Cross, and then next thing you know, we were shutting down Red Cross. And so I'm just hoping that's an area that's improved. On the evacuation route piece, I would completely agree with that. And I understand that there's a lot of times one road in, one road out. In our case, it was Highway 213. And yes, it took like 2 or 3 hours just to get from Oregon City down to 205. And so I guess I'm hoping that you're talking to ODOT because ODOT has a role here in either freeing up lanes or blocking off lanes and making smooth transition onto the interstate. When you have a whole pile of traffic heading to an interstate and trying to make their way into Portland or into other areas going north of Vancouver. So you hadn't mentioned ODOT, so I just wanted to mention it, that I hope they're part of your communication plan.
Yeah, we like to think that we talk to the DTT traffic folks, and we know they're talking with ODOT, but that way, they're planning their traffic together, and we kind of interface with them on that way. On the fire evacuation levels, we have a couple ideas on how we want to get that done a little bit better. Part of the problem is always going to be the fire weather and the wind and what it does. And fire, we've seen between this and Eagle Creek, these fires are moving faster than we ever thought they could. And that scares us sometimes. So sometimes we don't think they're moving and they do. And it just depends on how the wind's going to go. And I leave it to the fire folks that know and study this weather to kind of make those recommendations. But we've got a couple ideas about how to establish some evacuation zones to make sure that we're doing it in sensible chunks of there.
Next up is Councillor Pratt.
Hi, you made a statement about that you had a COVID shelter and then a fire evacuation shelter open at the same time, and you wouldn't do that again. So I'm just wondering what you would do in the future, what you would have done differently.
It wasn't a shelter, it was our emergency operations center. So we were responding effectively to both disasters at the same time, and it was just confusing because we had logistical and finance and operations staff doing sometimes parallel things. We thought it was we were just responding to the fire. We wanted to focus on that and not burden the public health folks. And then that just got confusing because we were reserving hotel rooms in some case for COVID people, and then we also needed hotel rooms for people evacuating from the fire, and we were just losing track of what hotel rooms were for who. And if we'd had that all in one location, it would have been much smoother. So from now on, we never want multiple disasters going on at the same time, but if we do, it'll be operating out of the same center.
Yeah, that the COVID situation, the social distancing within that small facility just really complicated it. It was, staff did an amazing job of moving that up. We were there to watch that. I was impressed. Next up is Commissioner Martha Schrader.
Hi, everyone from the coast. It's a lot cooler here. I think it's cooled down in the valley as well. One of the things I wanted to mention in terms of animal evacuation, that the head of extension at OSU has expressed a desire to work with us as well as the other emergency responders to help move livestock out of the way of danger. And I guess my question is, have those conversations occurred yet? And if not, what do we need to do to connect you to the correct people? Because they see themselves as having a pretty rigorous role in helping out with that. And that includes finding sites.
Yeah, that's great. We've had preliminary conversations with them on wildfire preparedness in general, and there will be, I don't think we've set a date yet, but I think in a few weeks we're conducting a kind of a webinar with them. And so we're talking about this webinar as well as talking about other ways that they can support the response. But that
Okay.
Looks like it'll be a great asset for us.
So that contact has happened and it is in process. Okay, because they felt that that could be a significant role for them, and at least that was my understanding. So thank you.
Okay. Next up is Councillor Lewis.
Great, thank you. I'm really glad we're having this conversation, particularly in light of just having had a weekend of emergency. So much, I think, is in how people are notified, and I think you've done a really nice job of having learnings from the kind of push out of the zone 1, which caused confusion. But I think we just also need to think about who the messengers are, and I think that the going door to door, at the go now stage, was really important. But if there's any way that we can be helpful for even, kind of the zone 2 or the zone 1 neighborhood level door to door, I want to be part of resourcing that or thinking through who the messengers are, because we can't wait until it's go now in the future. I think we've got to have people at the door to door before that.
Okay.
Yeah. One thing I did want to say for folks that aren't aware of this and people in the audience as well, and that is that our EOC certainly has a role into the management of these emergencies, but in a fire especially, the command and control is usually the fire officials, whoever's assigned to that. So that's one thing that a lot of those determinations are made by then. And there was a handoff within a couple days from our local fire folks to the state or the national fire group. So there was a handoff on that Wednesday night. There was that official handoff. So it was an interesting, very rigorous, tough week or so. Just trying to navigate that from our level, trying to take all the, as commissioners, we're working almost around the clock. It felt like trying to respond to all the crises and fill in all the gaps and answer all the questions, but nothing like all our emergency responders. Our emergency responders really did a great job, and that includes all the agencies as well. So last but not least, it looks like we have Mayor Kaiser.
Thank you, Commissioner Salvis. Couple things. First off, we had a group show up here in Malala called Cowgirl 911, and they were very instrumental in getting animals and helping people with animals evacuate. Have you looked into talking with them and getting them on your list?
They're on our list, but we haven't talked with them yet. We do know that they were an incredible asset to the Clackamas County community, and they're kind of on that. We're trying to find a way to kind of bundle a single contact with all of them, but we're aware of everything they did, and we're going to be reaching out to them.
Okay, and my second question thought would be, I got off work when they evacuated us. I drove from Clackamas to Molalla. I saw all the traffic heading toward Oregon City. But when I got to Molalla, there was absolutely no traffic heading toward Woodburn on 211. Has the county thought about, in the next situation, maybe talking with Marion County to set up something? And I mean, that would have alleviated a ton of traffic if some of that traffic could have been diverted out to 11 toward Woodburn, maybe to the state fairgrounds, whatever.
Yeah, I'll definitely talk with our transportation folks on that. I know that there was evacuation zones in Marion County. And we didn't put that on a map so you could see it comparatively. And I'm not sure where they were. But I think we need to make sure that's an option, and so that not everyone is trying to evacuate out of the northwest corner of the county.
Perfect, thank you.
Great. Well, lots of questions. I know it's at top of mind right now as we go through it, come into the season, an early season, when the ground is very dry out there. We have drought conditions. So it's at the top of mind for everyone. We're a little bit over, but we're doing pretty well. Next up is Mike Besner. He's going to talk about our Strategic Investment Fund.
Yes, 1 second, we'll move them over. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for coming tonight. I'm sure we'll talk more in the future, but hopefully not about pending disasters. Hopefully more about preparing for future ones.
Thank you for the time.
But before Daniel disappears, I just want to say he and Nancy did an outstanding job in that EOC. They're still there for, well, he is still there, for goodness sake, between 3 disasters in a year. And I was in the AOC when all that fire stuff was going down. I've been listening and taking some notes, and I'll tell you, it was really, really chaotic. You had all these different fire districts calling in, all of them saying, yeah, we need to close this, we need to evacuate that. It wasn't just one at the time. And we immediately were throwing road crews out there to close roads. And it was like midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning almost. It was absolutely crazy. We definitely all learned a lot, and we'll be working with Daniel further to try and do better. I appreciate some of the suggestions. Like I said, I was taking notes. But I'm here to give you an update on the Strategic Investment Fund, which is part of the Community Road Fund, which is what the county calls our local vehicle registration fee. If you, I don't know, you probably all weren't here when we originally did this. In fact, I know you weren't. The vehicle registration fee, by law, 60% goes to the county and 40% goes to the cities for them to all split it up by population. The amount that the county gets, we actually got 50%, and 10% of the whole was put into this pot of money called the Strategic Investment Fund by our county commissioners. And basically they said, hey, let's use this to do road transfers and maybe do some projects of mutual interest between county and cities. And what we did is we compiled a bunch of stuff, and I came to C4 a little while ago, pre-COVID originally, and created a list with a schedule. It got all the columns to match, and C4 voted on it and said, yes, we agree, go forward and do it. So I'm here to give you an update. Interestingly, collections so we just ended our fiscal year yesterday, I think, right? And so interestingly, the collections were making the vehicle registration fee. This has been incredibly, I'm going to call it interesting, which is a terrible word, but from a, following the changes in traffic over the last year and a half, and the registration fee, which, if you recall, DMV closed, they gave people amnesties. And so people have been coming back and paying their fee eventually. And so we were seeing a very low amount of revenue for a while, and then it really picked up. And I'd say the last 3 months or so, we've gotten about the amount of revenue that we expected, which is about, as a total for the whole county, including cities, about 11 million. So that's, almost $1 million a month. And we've been seeing a little more than that the last 3 months. But in 2021, we actually collected about 10.7 million. So a little bit less than we would expect, which means 10% of that, or about a little over $1 million we have in this little pot for the Strategic Investment Fund. So year one, the plan was to do a road transfer with the city of Canby, pretty sizable one actually, and do a road transfer with Gladstone, and then get some of these, couple of the first, really the first project, just start kicking the tires on 362nd improvements just outside of Sandy. And so what I can tell you is we completed about half the Canby road transfers. We've actually all approved them all. Just there's public hearings going on. They're in process for about $740,000, which was pretty close to the target. The Gladstone transfer, there were some, and I know Mayor Stempel's here. We've talked to staff. They've had a little bit of turnover. Their public works director left. And so I actually talked to the city manager last week. We said, well, let's back it up 1 year and just talk more. And so those talks will be ongoing. And then Canby, we have another series of ones that the plan originally scheduled for 21-22. In addition, Milwaukee, there's about $216,000 to transfer a portion of Lake Road. And so, and I have not yet reached out to Milwaukee staff, and since it's July 1st, I can start doing that. We are getting ready to start design on 362nd, and we are getting ready to start design slightly behind it of the Deuce Eagle Creek intersection just outside of Estimator. So those are the first two projects. And you know, everything's pretty much on target. In 1920, we actually did collect about 290,000. And when I look forward and add inflation, I'm showing we're roughly, I kind of need that money to plug some of the gaps to keep the fund whole. But that's our status update. So in general, things are good. People are paying their registration fees. Your cities, you're all getting your money. I think that process has been going smooth. I haven't heard any complaints. And you know, we're going to keep going. And so in 21-22, expect those two projects to get designed, or at least most of them. I think I would expect that the 362nd project's probably a 2023 construction. And we'll see what we can do with the Estimator one. See if we can bring that along. I got to make sure the cash flow works. And like I said, Milwaukee, Canby, and then talk to Gladstone and see if we can still make that road transfer happen. With that, I'm happy to answer questions if you have them.
I would just add that this plan that Mike just walked through is also in your packet. Kind of shows by the order of year how those projects would unfold.
Okay. Councillor Heisey.
Just real quick to clarify, are you saying that the Lake Road transfer from Milwaukee is still on target time-wise, or do you think that's going to shift outward a little given the slowdowns you've got with the other projects that are already in the hopper?
No, it's scheduled for 21-22, and right now I don't see any reason why we couldn't do it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Mike, I just want to let you know, my June contribution on the VRF was just a little, almost $600. So just want to let you know that as I go through the year, I'll be contributing pretty heavily.
I'm sure all the cities are saying thank you.
Mhm.
As am I in the county, of course. Yeah.
Was that for that campaign bus, Paul?
No, I don't have that no longer. I retired the campaign truck. Any other comments for Mike? Okay, great. Well, thank you, Mike.
All right, you bet.
For your
Anytime.
presentation. And we'll thank all our constituents for contributing to the fund.
Told me this would take 5 minutes, and he was right.
Yep. So I think that puts us back on target here. So C4 retreat updates, Trent. Oh, no, actually, I'm sorry. Updates for the 2021 legislative session, Chris Lyons.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Here to give you the final recap on the legislative session. If you were following along, some of this you may have already heard, and apologies to Commissioners Savas and Schrader, who already heard this debrief a couple days ago. As you have undoubtedly seen, the legislature adjourned this past Saturday, just one day shy of their constitutional limit of 160 days. And it was a session like no other. virtual all the way to the end. I didn't set foot in the building one time, and it was certainly a different way of lobbying and communicating for everybody. But at the end of the day, I would say they got a ton done. And for the purposes of Clackamas County, we really hit it out of the park. So wanted to walk through some of the different issues we were working on. There were a total of just over 2,500 bills introduced this session, and the county was tracking just over 1,600 of those, and we had positions on 41 of them. We went into session with 4 key priorities and worked with our Clackamas caucus of legislators who adopted all 4 of those as their own priorities, which was really helpful. And they really, all throughout session, were fighting for those issues, and we were successful on all of those. So the first being Clackamas County's top legislative priority, which has been for a few years now, is our Clackamas County Courthouse and replacing the existing building down on Main Street in Oregon City, which is obsolete. And in the final budget bills of session, the legislature authorized our requested $94.5 million for that, the state match towards that project. So we, the county, are already moving ahead with soliciting bids. We actually just put out our RFQ on that today, and looking forward to moving that along. There was a budget note in one of the budget bills that asked the county and the Oregon Judicial Department to put forward a joint report answering some questions about the public-private partnership that project will be designed under, because there is some unfamiliarity with P3 type projects at the legislature. So we do need to answer those questions before the authorized funds are approved for expenditure. But I believe that's just due diligence, and here later this year we'll take care of that in an e-board meeting. Secondly, the I-205 project. So I've reported to you before on some status updates with that one, and in just the last couple days of session, the House and then the Senate passed HB 3055, which was the transportation omnibus bill. It included a host of things, but for our purposes, it did end up including that what became known as the flexible penny. Previously, the 1 penny dedicated to the Rose Quarter project. It is now a flexible penny, meaning that ODOT can use it to also advance the I-205 bottleneck project, the Boone Bridge project, and tolling in and of itself as a project, specifically the congestion management in the region. And ODOT has said, now that this bill is passed, they will be able to start construction on phase 1 of I-205 in the spring. So that is the Abernathy Bridge, or I guess I should say phase 1 is 10th Street, West Lynn, 10th Street all the way to 213, including the Abernathy Bridge. So the Abernathy Bridge alone is a $300 million project. That bill also tees up tolling as a future project that ODOT will be implementing, and through that, revenue will be generated for some of these projects on the regional system, including 205 and the Rose Quarter. The bill also importantly clarified that revenues that are generated from congestion pricing can be used off the interstate on adjacent, parallel, and connected routes. So that will be super important for some of our local communities like West Lynn and Oregon City and Gladstone that will see traffic impacts as a result of tolling on the local roads. So that those monies can now be used to improve those facilities as well to accommodate changing traffic patterns. And third issue is our Sunrise corridor. So we had put forward what we called the Sunrise Gateway Corridor Community Visioning Concept, which is essentially a proposed 2-year project to do a whole bunch of community engagement along the Sunrise Corridor, all the businesses, the residents, people that pass through that area, to update some of our plans that we already have out there, but also better assess what we in the community want that area to ultimately look like, so we can better decide how to make our future investments around transportation, land use, zoning, water infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. That was a $4 million request to the legislature, which was included in the final Christmas tree, what's known as the Christmas tree funding bill. So that can now move forward. So our transportation department is already moving that along as quickly as possible. And hopefully that will allow us to position that that area for significant future investments, 2 years out. So definitely a big thanks to Reps Bynum and Drazen, who are our champions on that. The county had worked super closely with the Metro and Happy Valley teams, and many of your organizations that also supported our efforts. So we really appreciate that. And then the fourth priority was the Willamette Falls locks. And we had a couple of requests on this one. First, a few months ago, we saw the Public Corporation Bill, HB 2564, pass pretty early into session. And it's already been signed by the governor. And that establishes that public corporation to serve as the entity that will ultimately own the locks once they are transferred from the Army Corps of Engineers to the state. And then second, in the last couple of days of session, $7.25 million was provided specifically for repairs of the locks. So that's a huge win. That's roughly half of what is needed to fully modernize the locks and eventually get them reopened. So that was a huge team effort that had many of our different teams, our organizations, pushing that one along. So a big win there. And it also positions us really well at the federal level for additional federal funding now that the state has really done their part to chip in. And then just some other highlights that I think are important. Obviously, wildfire was a big focus of the legislature. And in the last week or so of session, they really did a lot. SB 762 was the Omnibus wildfire bill, specifically preparedness, forward-looking bill. And it creates a comprehensive statewide response plan to plan for and mitigate future fires. And roughly $200 million was provided to fund all of those efforts with state agencies. And there were a host of other bills looking more backward at the 2020 fires and providing relief for different local governments and other property owners that were impacted by the fires. And a host of earmarks were also provided. The Molalla, Canby, Estacada, Clackamas fire districts all got hundreds of thousands, if not a couple $1 million towards all of their efforts. And Clackamas County received a bit of funding, as did other local governments, for lost tax revenue as a result of the fires. The legislature made historic investments in behavioral health and housing this session. And specifically on housing, they did pass a bill in the last few days of session that provided 60 days of eviction protection for tenants who couldn't pay their rent, but had applied for rental assistance and just had not received it yet. So that was an important thing as the eviction moratorium was expiring at the end of the month to get through. There was a bill, SB 582, dealing with modernizing the state's recycling system. That one passed in the last couple days. Another one that requires the labeling of non-disposable wipes, which was HB 2344, important to our wastewater providers. That one passed. And then a couple interesting tobacco bills. a tobacco retail licensing bill, which has been talked about for years now. That one passed and it goes into effect January 1. Essentially, sellers of tobacco now either need to get their license from the Department of Revenue or a city or a local public health authority to be able to continue selling. And then also the legislature prohibited online sales of e-cigarettes, specifically to help limit youth from gaining access to nicotine. And then lastly, because the legislature had so much funding this session to work with, they had those end of session budget bills provided earmarks for a host of other projects across the state. And just a handful to note, in our county, $5 million was given to the Clackamas County Fairgrounds for the livestock barn, the RV park, and emergency housing out there. The county will be getting $100,000 to invest in a new Clackamas County mobile health van to be able to drive around the whole county with that. Washington and Clackamas County will be getting some funding to help help our efforts to fund the new shuttle that will be running along 205 between Bridgeport Village and Clackamas Town Center. Gladstone Library got $500,000. The Oak Grove Community Center project got $750,000. There was about $5 million provided to the business recovery centers across the county. And then lastly, there were 4, I think, important programmatic statewide funding pots that received a boatload of cash. There's a new broadband fund established at the state broadband office that will be getting $120 million. So I anticipate, there will be some significant grant opportunities coming from that. There's a new county fair fund established to help with capital repairs at fairs across the state for $10 million. A brownfield fund for $10 million to help clean up brownfields across the state. And lastly, $10 million to help establish family treatment courts statewide. And Clackamas County may be a pilot through that effort. And I'll just close and say, we found out in the last couple of days of session that while the Capitol will now soon be opening, like the rest of the state has just done, it will also be seeing the start of construction to seismically retrofit the building. And that project will actually render almost the entire building closed, with the exception of the 2 chambers and the Capitol and the rotunda, I mean. So I anticipate that very few will actually still be going to the Capitol until about 2023. But in the meantime, this September, there's likely to be a special session on redistricting that legislators will be down there to attend. So with that, I will close and happy to answer any questions.
Great. Well, thank you, Chris. Looks like there's no questions. Appreciate the update. A lot of stuff, a lot of money flowing due to federal assistance and other things. So that should spur some economic activity. Next up is the C4 retreat updates. Trent.
Thank you very much. Yes, so thank you everybody for completing your doodle poll for which weekend in October it works for you or not. That's really helpful to me. I know once upon a time that I said we were looking at September and October, but the Resort at the Mountain said September was not an option for them, for us. And so they gave me those 3 October dates, and that's how we chose those dates. By popular demand, October 1 and 2, I think it was, that first weekend in October was the most available weekend. There is one C4 member who said that is not a good weekend for them. That is Councillor Lewis. And so, not to call you out, but just, it's you're very important to this group, and so I want to make sure that we know what we're missing here. But it did look like there was significant challenges with other weekends, and that's because everybody's meeting now that COVID's over. And so the League of Oregon Cities has a conference that month. The mayor's national convention is also meeting that month. There's just a lot happening. it happens. And also even that first weekend is the ICMA for county city managers starts meeting that Saturday on the 2nd of October. But we don't have a lot of city managers who attend this retreat, and we start on Friday, Saturday. And so their meeting starts on Saturday, Sunday. So it could still be some overlap where we get someone like a county administrator who has typically attended the retreat in the past. Well, all that to say, I think that the October 1-2 weekend is going to perhaps be the best option for this group. Please hold that in your calendar for right now. I am trying frantically to get a hold of the resort to make sure that they lock it in. As you can imagine, they would not let me block 3 weekends while I did this doodle poll for as many rooms as we might need. But now that we know that this is the date, I will ask them to lock this in for us. Hopefully that's not taken, but they know that we were looking at it. So hopefully they were kind of loosely holding it for us. But ideally tomorrow I'll be able to get a hold of them. We played a lot of phone tag the last couple of days. But per this group's wishes, we are looking at something similar to what we've done in the past, where we start on early Friday afternoon around 1 or 2 o'clock, have some initial C4 business, some primary topics, maybe even a keynote, some social time on Friday evening, and then back to work on a Saturday morning for a second topic that this group would cover. This group has already told me, C4U members have already told me in the executive committee that you want to talk about transit and you want to talk about disaster preparedness. So Daniel, who you saw today, will be helping with that, as well as Matthew Silva, who is our fire district member here at C4. He's also volunteered to help bring a collaborative group together for those types of discussions. And so we'll put something together in that vein. And for the transit side of things, we'll be working with our great transit team here, Dwight and Teresa and Tom, as well as our Malala guy, who I think is our alternate for the rural side of things. I'll work closely with them to make sure that we have a robust transit discussion as well for the retreat. And so that's the plan right now. Once I get a hold of the resort, I'll be able to do a lot of calculations and get out the registration fees. And I'll just, as a reminder, the C4 members are, who we're aiming for the retreat, but it's open to anybody. So anyone from your city council can attend, including the alternates, including your mayors or your councilors, could be the whole council. As far as we're concerned. So it's really open. It's not typically a voting meeting, although there are some votes, and we just try to ask you to stand up and separate yourselves in those instances. But it's a really open event. It's a public event. So as long as the registration fee is paid, we're happy to have anybody be there. So you could be there without the registration fee. It just makes it complicated when it's public. So all that to say, this is what we're looking for. I'm happy to take any feedback on it. And with that, it kind of helps to set up to the upcoming meetings for C4 to get ready for that retreat. And so I'll just say in August, we're looking at ODOT is coming to talk about what Chris just talked about, House Bill 3055, and what that means in terms of the congestion management pricing work that's going on, as well as an update on the STIP, which they talked about in June. So that's what August is looking like so far. And then in September, because there are so many transit discussions and there's going to be a transit discussion at the retreat, we're thinking that it would be helpful and relevant, and we've heard from you, to have a sort of educational catch-up meeting on transit. And so Dwight and Tom and Teresa, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you'll be getting a phone call soon on helping to set up for that presentation. So I'll stop talking there. Happy to take questions, but please, please, please hold your calendars for that first weekend in October. And probably means we'll be, just my recommendation, skipping the October C4 meeting on that Thursday night, because we'll have done so much work the weekend before.
Okay, thank you, Trent. I don't see any hands up, so going once, twice, no hands up. So that brings us to Impact Jpeg updates. Trent, I see something about the response to the C4 letter. Was someone going to speak to that in particular?
This is just an FYI for me. As you might recall, back in February, C4 submitted a letter to Metro and Jpeg in particular that was advocating for a request that SMART submitted to Jpeg, and I'm going to say this wrong, but there was a federal agency who was, I don't want to say auditing, the Jpeg process, but I think that's just a normal process where they check in on these things. Anyway, SMART had some recommendations on how to be have an increased membership role at that table. C4 sent a letter to that regard, and this is JPAC's response to that letter. So I just wanted to make sure that it was shared with everybody here. Dwight, who represents SMART, is one of your acting members right now, as well as Councillor Lewis is on JPAC. So just wanted to add this letter as an FYI that this was the response to this particular group from your particular letter.
Great. I'm going to give a little bit of an update on JPAC, and then I'll ask Councillor Heisey if she has anything to add, and also Councillor Lewis. One thing in particular that I wanted to raise tonight was in the recent past, when anything came up for JPAC that was highway related, like bottleneck stuff and so forth, there has been quite a few people speak against highway projects. They moved up the approval for the amendment, I believe it's the Mtip amendment, to recognize the funds and the project for I-205, the project itself that was just approved basically by the legislature for the funding. So that's been moved up from August to this month, July. Was that July 20? I forgot what date that is. But my request to you all, Trent, can you help me with the JPAC date? My request to you all, or anyone, especially maybe our West Lynn, Wilsonville, Oregon City mayors, in particular Gladstone, is perhaps if a mayor or city councilor could possibly come and testify in support of the Mtip amendment to make that happen. And anyone else interested, it's something that we're always unsure as to how those things go when they, we've even had TV camera crews there when some of these folks have come to testify. So it's a pretty well organized group, a lot of passionate speaking. They have showed up at the Oregon Transportation Commission as well. And so I'm hoping that that this goes smoothly, but we never know. Councillor Lewis, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, it's the 15th, and I think you're exactly right. Right now, the plan is to have it be part of the consent agenda, as the Mtip amendments always are. I was talking with staff today about needing to script out what happens if somebody on JPAC asks to pull it out. We'll have the ability, I think, to pull it out and vote on it same day. I will not second or encourage anybody to second a motion to table it for further discussion. There's an urgency here, not only in that this is a shovel-ready project, but they're trying to take advantage of a window of time where they can actually do some in-water barge work, and they can't do that in January. They got to do it when it's nice out. So we got to get it done. I think we're gonna hear from members of the public. I don't have any feelers out there from elected officials that we're gonna face trouble. If folks do start to hear that, please let our Clackamas County voting JPAC members, Heisey, Savis, myself know. We'll be ready. We got to get this done.
Yeah. Any of the cities, especially in the vicinity of the 205, are affected by the diversion. Mayor Buck, you as well from Lake Oswego. I know Lake Oswego feels some of those impacts from cut through. Mayor Fitzgerald, I know you have some cut through as well. And of course, Mayor Walters, West Lynn, sees significant diversion today. And of course, Gladstone, Milwaukee, unincorporated Clackamas County, we're all seeing the result of traffic backups and people trying to find a shortcut through our communities. So it's a safety issue more than anything else. And for those in their communities, as well as those on the freeway, where that bottleneck goes from 3 lanes to 2 lanes, both east and west. So that's what I have there. Councillor Heisey, anything that you want to speak to on JPAC?
I don't have a lot to add. I think that was the key thing to talk about. We have continued to talk about the regional mobility policy update, and we have continued to talk about the transportation strategy management. And we just have these big chunks of big things that we're going to be talking about for the next couple of years. I think all of you have been a part of presentations about those topics at C4 or C4 Metro at this point, so I won't belabor the topic. I'm always happy to talk further about either of those at any time offline.
Okay, great. Mtip update, or MPAC update, I'm sorry. I'll spit it out. Who wants to take that on?
I'll take that. We talked at our last meeting, we had a kind of a housing panel, different folks that build affordable housing in the area, talking about somewhat implementation, how they're using metro housing bond dollars, but just in general about the barriers to affordable housing and our various jurisdictions. That was a really good panel, and we might have some follow up to that at our next meeting. We just had a planning meeting this morning. I'm trying to think of what else we have kind of coming up there. Some of this same, maybe Councillor Lewis. We just met this morning. Now
It's been a day.
all I can think about is fireworks. So
the other important thing to note is we had a presentation from the port on a resilient runway, so that when the big one comes, if we do this improvement, we'll still have a runway that within a day or so can start getting us our emergency supplies. They did not ask us for money, thank goodness, because they're talking big bucks, but they need actually a federal program change in order for federal dollars for resiliency in airports to make sense for this project. So it's a federal issue. They're also going to be asking the state for money. Good project.
Yeah.
And I just want to add, doing a little crosstalk on the windows here, that if we have future conversations about housing, Trent, the panel was really excellent. And I'm glad to hear from Joe that there may be follow-up on MPAC about that, because it opened up a lot of good conversations that I think would benefit this group extensively. I took some somewhat detailed notes that I'm trying to write up. And it's another topic I'm happy to discuss with anyone further, but really great minds, great resources.
Great. Appreciate that comment about housing. Yes, Mayor Buck was also texting me earlier about housing. And so we, as you heard, it's a pretty busy agenda for this group moving towards the retreat, but obviously housing is a hot topic for this group. It's one of your primary topics called out in the bylaws, and so it's not lost on us. There's a lot going on with it, and we are, I think, the executive committee is here hearing that recommendation too and that request. So at earliest, we're looking at November, unless we want to move that September transit discussion around. But I think November probably is a good plan for now, unless I hear otherwise.
And Paul, I'd like to mention one thing. I know that Joe and I had a real conversation at an event about the wraparound services measure and how we're ramping that up in relationship to this. And Joe, you did mention that maybe some of our municipalities might consider having some resources for that as well. As you know, we're ramping it up. We've come up with a plan. We're going to invest about 10 million. We're going to see how far. We're going to check it every quarter. Commissioner Savas and I worked on a administrator's housing team to come up with that with our chief financial officer and our housing department heads, as well as Gary Schmidt. So that is in process, just to let you know, but the money is not coming in as quickly as we would like. We are committed to implementing the program, but if any of the cities wants to talk to us about actually helping us out with additional resources, we're open to that. I don't know what that would entail. I don't know if it would be an IGA, an MOU, probably an IGA, I guess. But, we're all basically facing the same issues with houselessness in our county as well as in our cities. And we all know that unless people are getting adequate wraparound services, they'll kind of have a more of a potential to fall out, to fall into houselessness again. So I just wanted to put that out there, Joe. We didn't come up with anything specific, but I said the county wouldn't say no to having resource partnerships with our cities. So just an FYI.
Yeah, just
I know.
to build on Commissioner Schrader's thing about.
Sorry, Joe.
Services,
Did I set you up?
Last 6 or 7 weeks has been pretty rough and tough ruckus for us. We've had because we were anticipating July 1st or told that we would have all the counties would have a pretty good chunk of the supportive housing services dollars available on July 1st. And we were anticipating about $24 million that we were going to have. And what really happened is that the monies aren't flowing quite yet, and it'll be just slowly ramping up. But our July distribution or disbursement is $150,000 versus the 24. So you can imagine we have been scrambling to try to figure out ways to patch and put together a financial plan to build basically a bridge and a ramp to increase services in the interim. So it's been quite a ride. So just to add a little bit of context, it's created a lot of confusion. There's a lot of misinformation about that, but I think we're in a good place right now, and the board approved that unanimously on Tuesday. And so we're good to go for the startup. And hopefully in September, October, based on just disbursements, if it's looking more favorable, we'll be able to ramp that up at a faster clip. So we're doing everything we can to deal with that crisis. So that's what I have on that. And I see that Dwight, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank this group for their support relative to our fight for direct representation on Jpeg. It is a fight. I expect it will continue to be a fight, but I want this group to know that SMART's fight or request for direct representation is more than that. I look around the screen here and I see mayors from Malala, and I see mayors from Sandy, and I know the mayor from Canby isn't here tonight, but I just want them to know that it is also an attempt to get them represented. They all, and also Clackamas County that operates service within Metro's boundaries. And so this is not about SMART. I mean, some people may make it about SMART, but it really isn't. It's about a coalition of small providers that have been, well, disrespected, in my opinion, continue to be disrespected. And yet we're just, kind of tired of being sick and tired. And so this is our push. We're going to continue to fight. And so I ask this group not to be scared, not to be frightened, but just to continue to support this move as we shake it up a little bit. Dr. King talked about the privilege. He said they rarely give up their privileges voluntarily and without strong resistance. And that is exactly what we are dealing with here. So I just wanted to thank you. I'd be remiss if I went into the 4th of July holiday without thanking you again for your support on this.
Thank you, Dwight. I see there's an I-205 letter update. Trent, were you going to speak to that as well?
Yes, just a quick thank you to everybody here. This is a letter that we prepared for the senators in particular, as the federal infrastructure package continues to be built and developed. There's a lot of things going on in Washington, D.C., as you know. Earlier in the year, Congressman DeFazio and the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee created a surface transportation bill that just passed the House like yesterday, I think. And so that's in its final form and now going to the Senate, where the Senate will, take a crack at it as well and put their own priorities into that bill. So the intent of this letter was to get in front of the senators, knowing that the House process had already gone through. There was a lot of work to get a lot of logos on this letter. I would just encourage every one of you to take a look at that letter and just see how broad the coalition is. And because of timing, regretfully, we didn't actually get everybody on there because we had to get this letter to the senators and with some haste. But I think we could have even had more names on here. And there were, again, just a couple trickled in after we'd already submitted the letter. So it was kind of challenging to add more logos after the fact. But all the way over to Hillsborough, Washington County, Portland Business Alliance, Metro, ODOT, Clackamas County, several businesses, many chambers, and throughout the county. It's probably one of the biggest logo letters I've ever seen come out of Clackamas County at all. And I think that shows the regional and local support for a project like this. As Chris mentioned earlier, House Bill 3055 creates some money for phase 1 of the I-205 project. But as you know, tolling is still tied to that project as a potential funding mechanism, not just the congestion pricing, regional congestion, that's also there. But until there is more funding, it's a big project, as you know, tolling is still considered one of the funding options. And so this letter says, federal funding to diversify ODOT's funding opportunities on this project creates that opportunity to potentially remove that just tolling the bridge conversation and moves Clackamas County and this project towards only having that regional congestion pricing discussion. So again, there's 2 tolling conversations going on, and federal funding could potentially remove one of them so that we're all having the same conversation in the region. That would be a huge win for everybody. I think that was clearly communicated and refined in this letter several times, but again, just thank you to everybody who submitted a logo to this letter. Again, thank you to those who worked really hard for some of your agencies or for some of your partner agencies to do that, because I know in some cases it was a big lift. But just wanted to share this letter, encourage you to reach out and say thank you to folks who are on here that might not normally be on here. It's a really big deal, and I'm just really encouraged by the way this group has been working together and reaching out and doing good work.
Okay, thank you, Trent. Mayor Walters.
Yeah, first of all, I just wanted to tell you, Trent, that at the City of Westland, we were all admiring your logo building skills, your artwork on the top, very talented, so thank you. But also thank you for spearheading this letter. I think I totally agree with you, and I really just appreciate it, so thank you.
Mayor Walters, getting back to that July 15th meeting at
Yes.
If you have concerned citizens or impacted citizens as well, any citizen in the region can testify at Metro or at the Jpeg meeting that morning. So I would just encourage you. I know that your city's impacted more by this diversion than anyone. So all help and would be appreciated.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll get the word out and let me know if there's any particular talking points you want me to present outside of just the impact of the diversion.
Right, and we'll try to keep you, and maybe Christine can help too. I don't know if there's a lot of people testifying, there might be a pre-sign up in those circumstances. So we'll need to keep an eye on that as well. And just to share that with everyone, that sometimes when there's a lot of people, they kind of have to adjust the public testimony portion of the meeting and manage that a little bit differently.
I believe you'll get called first if you email to sign up at least a day ahead of time. And then they will take the hands up, but by that point we might be squished for time. So anybody who's remotely interested should email J Cromwell.
Okay. Well, folks, we're a little bit over. I appreciate all your input this evening. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Seeing none, all of you have a safe drive home and have a happy and safe 4th of July weekend.
Happy July. No fireworks.
Bye.
Bye.